My son-in-law, the man I fed at my own table, slapped me so hard my ears rang and then demanded the keys to the house I built with my blood. He sneered at me.
In that moment, the boy I once treated like a son spat on my dignity and reduced me to nothing. This is the story of how the husband of my daughter tried to break me. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories. We are keeping hope alive. The sting of that slap still burns on my face. His hand came down so hard, my ears rang. I remember the smirk, the way he looked at me like I was nothing but dust in his path. "Give me the house keys," he said, his voice steady, cold. This place belongs to me now. That was the moment I realized the man I once called a son had been sharpening his knife behind my back all along. But to understand how I ended up humiliated in my own home, I have to take you back. Back to the day Daniel first walked into our lives. I raised my daughter Sophia alone after her father passed. Life wasn't easy. I worked long shifts at the diner, sewed clothes at night, and pinched every penny until it squealed. Still, I gave Sophia the best I could. She grew up in this very house, the one I built with sweat and sacrifice. By the time Sophia turned 30, she was beautiful, smart, and determined, but she carried something inside her I couldn't fix, a quiet shame about where she came from. She hated our modest house, our simple life. She wanted silk sheets, fine dining, and big city lights. And then came Daniel. He was handsome, smooth-talking, dressed sharp in tailored suits. I met him the night Sophia brought him over for dinner. I can still picture it, his bright smile as he carried a bottle of wine into my kitchen. "Mrs. Johnson," he said warmly, setting the bottle on the counter. "Or may I call you Mom? You raised such a wonderful daughter. I should be thanking you." No man had ever spoken to me that way before. Respectful. Sweet. He even rolled up his sleeves and helped me set the table like he belonged. "You don't have to help with that," I told him, surprised. "Of course I do," he said. "This is family, right?" I felt my heart soften. For the first time in years, the house felt alive with laughter. He told funny stories about his work, made Sophia giggle like a schoolgirl, and even complimented my cooking. "Best pot roast I've ever had," he said, licking his fingers. "Mom, you'll have to teach me your recipe." Mom. He said it so naturally, so kindly, that I almost believed he meant it. Over the next few months, Daniel became a fixture in our lives. He mowed my lawn without being asked, carried groceries from the car, even fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching him hammer loose boards on the fence. Sweat rolled down his forehead, but he kept working. "You didn't have to do that," I told him. "Nonsense," he said, flashing that perfect smile. "This is my home too, isn't it?" I should have paid closer attention to the way he said my home, but at the time, I only felt grateful. Sophia glowed whenever Daniel was around. She called me late at night, telling me how lucky she felt, how Daniel made her feel safe and special. For the first time, I thought maybe she had found the man who would love her better than life itself. When Daniel asked for her hand in marriage, I gave my blessing. I even dipped into my savings to help pay for the wedding. "Mom," Sophia said, hugging me tight, "you're the best. I promise you, this will all come back to you one day." I smiled, though my chest ached. I had spent years saving that money for emergencies, but for my daughter's happiness, I opened my hand. The wedding was beautiful. Daniel stood tall in his black suit, eyes shining as he slipped the ring onto Sophia's finger. Everyone whispered about how lucky she was. "What a catch," they said. "He's such a good man." I believed it too, at least for a little while. The first crack appeared one Sunday afternoon. Daniel had stayed behind after church to help me wash dishes. His hands were in the soapy water, his sleeves rolled up, his smile as charming as ever. "Mom," he said casually, "do you have a will written up?" I frowned. "A will? Why do you ask?" "Oh, nothing serious," he said, rinsing a plate. "I just think it's wise to have everything in order. You've worked so hard for this house. You wouldn't want there to be confusion later." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. "Well, that's private business," I replied carefully. He chuckled like I had misunderstood. Of course, of course. I just worry about Sophia. If something happened to you, she'd be lost. You know I'd take care of her. I forced a smile, but unease crept into me. Why was he already talking about my death? Why did he care so much about my house? That night, I sat awake staring at the ceiling. Maybe I was overthinking. Daniel had been nothing but helpful, but deep inside, something told me to be cautious. I tried to push the thought away. After all, hadn't he treated me with more kindness than my own daughter sometimes showed? Hadn't he called me Mom more times than I could count? But life has a way of peeling off masks when you least expect it. And Daniel's mask began to slip sooner than I ever imagined. The weeks rolled by, and Daniel's presence in my house grew heavier. At first, it was little things. He'd open my refrigerator without asking. He'd sit in my chair at the table, the one I had always used since my husband passed. One evening, I came home from the store and found him walking through the hallway, studying the family portraits on the wall. His fingers brushed the frame of a photo of me holding Sophia as a baby. "You've done well, Mom," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "All this is impressive. Not many widows could hold a house like this together." I smiled faintly, though my guard was rising. "It wasn't easy," I said. "Every brick here came with a price." He turned, his eyes narrowing just a little. "And now, it's all part of Sophia's future. Don't you think so?" I didn't answer right away. Something in the way he said it made me feel like the house wasn't safe in my hands anymore, like I was just holding it until he decided to claim it. Still, Daniel had a way of disarming me. At family dinners, he'd shower me with compliments. "Best cornbread in the county," he'd declare, patting his stomach. "Mom, you've spoiled me." The neighbors adored him. At church, the pastor shook his hand and called him a blessing. People often told me, "You're lucky, Margaret." Most mothers would dream of such a caring son-in-law. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe I hadn't opened my daughter's life and my own to a snake. But then came the night that stripped away the last of my doubts. It was late, close to midnight. I had been sewing in my room, working on a quilt, when I heard voices in the living room. Sophia's laughter, light and tired, followed by Daniel's deeper tone. I meant to go to bed, but as I stepped into the hallway, I froze. Their voices carried clearly through the thin walls. Sophia sighed. "Sometimes I think Mom will never let go. She clings to that house like it's her only treasure." Daniel's reply was sharp, edged with impatience. "Because it is. She has nothing else. But listen to me, Sophia. When she's gone, everything is ours. Don't worry. She's lived long enough." My chest tightened. My knees almost gave way. I waited for my daughter to defend me, to say something, anything. But silence stretched for several seconds. Then Sophia said softly, "I know. I just don't want her to think I'm rushing her out." Daniel chuckled, low and cruel. "She won't matter soon. I'll take care of everything. Trust me." I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from gasping. My own flesh and blood, the daughter I had sacrificed my life for, was sitting in my living room, letting her husband plan my end like I was a burden waiting to die. I crept back to my room, heart pounding. The quilt slipped from my lap as I sat on the bed, shaking. Their words circled in my head like vultures. When she's gone, everything is ours. She's lived long enough. I stared at the walls of the house I had built with my sweat, the same walls that had sheltered Sophia when she was a child, the house that held my husband's memory, the house that was supposed to be my safe place until the end of my days. And now, it was the prize Daniel wanted. And Sophia, the daughter I had loved beyond reason, was letting him take it. The mask had fallen. Daniel was no golden son-in-law. He was a wolf who had walked through my door wearing a smile, and I had welcomed him. As I sat there in the silence, one thought seared into me. I was not just fighting for my home. I was fighting for my dignity. And I knew this was only the beginning. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? After that night, sleep stopped visiting me. I lay awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, Daniel's words echoing in my head. When she's gone, everything is ours. By day, I pretended. I smiled when neighbors asked about my wonderful son-in-law. I nodded when Sophia bragged about her marriage. But inside, my heart was trembling. I knew I had let a wolf into my house, but I didn't yet know how deep his fangs would sink. The first changes came in Sophia. She had always been warm with me, even if she sometimes felt embarrassed by my simple ways. But suddenly, she began pulling away. "Mom, don't call me so much," she said one afternoon when I phoned to ask if she was eating well. "Daniel doesn't like it when I'm on the phone too long. He says it's distracting." "Distracting from what?" I asked. "From building our future," she said sharply. You wouldn't understand. Her words stung. I stayed quiet, but I felt something cracking between us. Another day, she came to dinner and wrinkled her nose at the food I had cooked. "Mom, Daniel doesn't like us eating heavy meals like this," she said. "We're moving toward a healthier lifestyle. You should try it too." It wasn't the words themselves. It was the tone. Dismissive, like she was already looking down on me, and every time she said, "Daniel doesn't like," or "Daniel prefers," I knew who was pulling her strings. Daniel played his role perfectly. When others were watching, he was all smiles and compliments. "Mom, you're looking young today," he'd say loudly in church. "I hope Sophia ages like you." People laughed, nodding, saying what a blessing he was. But when no one else could hear, his tone was different. One night after Sophia had gone upstairs, I found him in the kitchen pouring a drink. "You know, Mom," he said quietly, "Sophia is too soft when it comes to you. You cling to her like a child. You should let her go. She has a husband now." I stood still, clutching my tea. "She's my daughter. That will never change." He smirked. "Of course, but don't you think she deserves to live her life without being chained to the past, without a mother holding her back?" I wanted to shout, to throw the cup in his face, but instead, I swallowed my anger and said nothing. Because I knew if I fought him openly, Sophia would only side with him. As the weeks passed, Sophia became harder to reach. She stopped joining me for Sunday lunch. She started dressing differently, flashy like Daniel's taste. She even cut ties with her old friends, women she had grown up with in this neighborhood. "Daniel says they're not ambitious enough," she explained. "They just drag me down." I watched her transform before my eyes, and I felt helpless. The girl I had raised was slipping away into his shadow, and then came the whispers. At first, I didn't notice, but slowly I realized my neighbors had grown distant. Mrs. Green, who used to stop by for coffee, suddenly avoided eye contact. The women at church stopped inviting me to gatherings. One evening, I caught a snatch of conversation outside the grocery store. "Poor Sophia," a woman whispered. "Her mother's so bitter, always interfering. No wonder the husband doesn't like her." I froze, my shopping bag heavy in my hand. Bitter? Interfering? Daniel. It was him. He was poisoning not only my daughter against me, but the whole community. I went home that night and cried alone in my kitchen. My dignity was being stripped away piece by piece, and he was the one pulling the threads. But God has a way of sending light in the darkest moments. One afternoon, my old neighbor Mr. Harris knocked on my door. He was a kind man in his 70s, had lived next to me for decades. "Margaret," he said gently, "I don't want to meddle, but I thought you should know something." I looked at him, worried. "What is it?" He glanced around before lowering his voice. "That son-in-law of yours, he's been asking around town about the value of your property. He came to me, said he was curious since I used to work in real estate, asked if I thought your house would sell high." My breath caught in my throat. He what? Mr. Harris nodded. I told him I didn't know and walked away. "But Margaret, watch yourself. That man doesn't seem right to me." I thanked him with trembling hands. After he left, I sat in the kitchen staring at the walls. Now I knew. Daniel's plan wasn't just to turn Sophia against me. He was already making moves to take what was mine, and I had to find out how far he had gone. That night I couldn't eat. My hands shook as I held my fork. Sophia noticed and frowned. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said quickly. I wasn't about to confess my fears in front of Daniel. He was sitting at the head of the table, his smile smooth as ever, cutting his steak like he had no care in the world. "Maybe you're just tired," he said, glancing at me. "You should rest more. This house is too much for one woman to manage." The way he said it made my stomach twist. He wasn't just commenting. He was planting the idea in Sophia's mind that I didn't belong here anymore. Sophia nodded in agreement. Mom, maybe you should think about downsizing. A smaller place would be easier. I looked at her, stunned. This is my home, Sophia. The home where I raised you. I'm not going anywhere. Daniel reached across the table and patted my hand with false kindness. Of course, Mom. We're only worried about your health. You know we want what's best for you. But I saw the flicker in his eyes. This wasn't concern. It was calculation. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. Everywhere I turned, Daniel's influence shadowed me. Sophia stopped calling me Mom with warmth. She now said it with impatience, like a chore. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone. No, I can't come, she said. Daniel says Mom gets too dependent if I spend too much time with her. Her words cut deeper than any knife. My daughter, the one I had fed, clothed, and prayed for, was now talking about me like I was some burden to be managed. And Daniel? He looked more confident by the day. He walked around my house like a king, inspecting corners, making notes on his phone, opening cupboards as if measuring the space. I began locking my bedroom door at night. For the first time in my own home, I felt unsafe. Then, one fateful afternoon, the truth finally fell into my lap. I had gone into town to pick up groceries. At the counter, the clerk smiled awkwardly at me. Margaret, he said hesitantly. Congratulations, I guess. Congratulations? For what? I asked, confused. He shifted on his feet. Oh, well, Daniel came in last week and mentioned he was getting your house appraised. Said it was already in motion. We all figured you were planning to sell. My stomach dropped. Appraised? I repeated, barely able to breathe. Yes, the clerk said slowly, realizing he had said too much. You? Didn't know? I shook my head and stumbled out of the store, my groceries forgotten. I went straight home, heart pounding. When I reached the porch, I saw them, Daniel and Sophia, standing with a man in a suit. They were walking around the yard, the man holding a clipboard, scribbling notes as he looked at the roof, the windows, the fence. My chest tightened. I gripped the railing to keep from falling. Daniel was smiling, gesturing at the house like he already owned it. Sophia stood beside him, arms folded, nodding, not once glancing at the window where I stood watching. The man in the suit pointed at the roof and said something I couldn't hear. Daniel laughed, clapped him on the back, and handed him a business card. I felt my throat close. My hands trembled so violently I thought I might faint. They weren't planning. They weren't guessing. They were already moving forward. Daniel had put my house up for valuation, without my knowledge, without my permission. I stepped back from the window, heart hammering against my ribs. The air in the house felt poisonous. This was no longer suspicion. This was proof. The son-in-law I had once called son was preparing to sell my house right out from under me. And my own daughter, the child I had sacrificed everything for, was standing at his side, silent. The walls of my home, the ones that held my husband's laughter, my daughter's first steps, my prayers in the night, they weren't just under threat. They were already on the auction block. And in that moment, a fire I hadn't felt in years rose inside me. If Daniel thought I would go down quietly, he was wrong. Dead wrong. This was my home, and I was going to fight. I had tried to stay quiet. I had swallowed my anger, hidden my fears, prayed for patience, but there comes a time when silence becomes poison, and I could no longer keep it down. The day I confronted Daniel was the day I truly lost my daughter. It started small. Sophia came over, dressed sharp in one of those expensive dresses Daniel bought her. I made her coffee and set out cookies like I used to when she was little. Sit, Sophia, I said gently. We need to talk. She sighed and glanced at her phone. Make it quick. Daniel's waiting for me. That burned. The daughter who used to curl up on this very couch for hours with me now treated my time like an inconvenience. But I pressed on. Daniel is planning something, I said quietly. He's already had the house appraised. I saw it with my own eyes. Sophia, he's trying to take this home from me. Her head snapped up. For a moment, I saw a flicker of doubt, but then her face hardened. Mom, don't start this again, she said. You've never liked Daniel. You're just jealous because he's successful. Jealous? My voice shook. Do you think I want his money? I worked my whole life for this place. Everything I've done has been for you, Sophia, and now you sit there and tell me I'm jealous? She stood, arms crossed. Daniel told me this would happen. He said you'd make up lies to turn me against him. Mom, you're obsessed. You're paranoid. The words pierced me deeper than any knife. My own child was looking at me with contempt, repeating Daniel's lies as if they were gospel. I swallowed hard. Sophia, listen to me. That man doesn't love you. He's using you. Can't you see it? But she didn't answer. She just shook her head, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door. Later that week, Daniel decided to stage a scene. He chose the family gathering at my house when cousins and neighbors had come by for dinner. He stood tall in the middle of the living room, his arm around Sophia, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "Mom's been acting strange lately," he said with a chuckle that wasn't really a chuckle at all. "She keeps accusing me of things. I worry about her mind." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. My cheeks burned. "I know exactly what I'm saying," I snapped. "This man wants my house. He's plotting behind my back. He's no saint. He's a thief." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel shook his head, sighing like a weary parent correcting a child. "Do you hear this?" he said, his hand tightening on Sophia's shoulder. "She's losing touch with reality. I've tried to be patient, but how much can a man take?" He turned to the guests, his face a mask of sorrow. "I love this woman like my own mother, but she's making it impossible. Please pray for her." Whispers began. Eyes shifted toward me with pity, not belief. My dignity shriveled. And through it all, Sophia stood there, lips pressed tight, eyes on the floor. She didn't speak. She didn't defend me. My heart broke in that moment, but the worst was still to come. The following Sunday, Daniel called for a family meeting. Reluctantly, I agreed. The cousins came again, neighbors too. He wanted an audience. As soon as we were gathered in the living room, Daniel rose to his full height, his voice strong and commanding. "Margaret," he said, "it's time to stop pretending. You're too old to keep this house up. It's not safe. It's not wise. This is the couple's inheritance now, me and Sophia's. Hand over the keys." My breath caught. "Inheritance?" I repeated, shaking my head. "I'm not dead, Daniel. This house is mine. Mine." Sophia's eyes darted nervously, but she didn't speak. Daniel's jaw clenched. "Stop being selfish. You've lived your life. It's time to let go." "I will never give you this house," I shouted. My voice cracked, but my spirit held firm. That's when it happened. In front of my daughter, in front of my family, in front of God and everyone, Daniel raised his hand and struck me across the face. The sound rang through the room like thunder. My ears buzzed. My vision blurred. Gasps filled the room. But Sophia, she said nothing. She didn't run to me. She didn't cry out. She just stood frozen, silent, watching me stumble back, humiliated, tears stinging my eyes. The sting of that slap burned hotter than fire. My ears rang, my cheek throbbed, but what cut deeper was the silence. The silence of my daughter. I looked at Sophia, my eyes pleading. "Sophia," I whispered, "are you going to let him do this to me?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her gaze and turned her face away. That silence was worse than the blow. Daniel straightened his jacket, his voice steady. "You see? She refuses to listen. She's clinging to the past. We can't keep living under her shadow." He turned to the others in the room, lifting his chin like a preacher delivering truth. "This house is ours now. Anyone who truly cares about family can see that." The crowd murmured. Some looked uncomfortable. Others avoided my eyes. But no one spoke up. Daniel turned back to me, his smile cold. "Give us the keys, Margaret. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I clutched my chest, shaking my head. "You'll have to drag me out first. This is my house. My blood is in these walls. You'll never take it while I breathe." For a long moment, we stared at each other, two wills colliding. Then, with a smirk, he turned to Sophia. "Tell her, love. Tell her it's time." My daughter's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, but still, no words came. Finally, she whispered, "Mom, maybe it's better if you let go." Her voice cracked, but it was enough. The knife had been plunged. That night, Daniel packed my bags himself. He dropped them by the door with a sneer. "You're done here, old woman," he said, his words dripping with triumph. "This is our home now. Don't come back unless you're ready to hand over the deed." Sophia stood in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself, tears running down her face. But she didn't stop him. She didn't fight for me. And so, with my head bowed and my dignity in tatters, I walked out of the house I had built with my own hands. I had nowhere to go. Most of my friends had already drifted away, poisoned by Daniel's whispers. So I found myself at the door of my estranged sister, Caroline. Caroline and I hadn't spoken in years. Old arguments, old wounds, old pride had built walls between us. But when she opened the door and saw me standing there with swollen eyes and a bruised cheek, she said nothing. She just pulled me into her arms. I broke down on her shoulder, sobbing like a child. Later that night, as we sat at her kitchen table, Caroline poured us both tea. She studied me for a long time before speaking. "I warned you about men like him," she said quietly. "Charming, smooth-talking, always smiling in public. I've seen his type before." "You don't understand," I whispered, wiping my tears. "He's taken everything. He turned Sophia against me." Caroline reached across the table, gripping my hand firmly. "Listen to me, Margaret. You're not the first woman he's destroyed, and if you don't act, you won't be the last." Her words made me look up. "What do you mean?" She sighed. When I heard Sophia married Daniel, I thought the name sounded familiar. Tonight I remembered why. A friend of mine in another city told me about a man, same age, same description, who married a wealthy widow, drained her savings, and then disappeared. His name was Daniel. My heart stopped. "Are you saying?" Caroline nodded grimly. "I think he already has another wife. Maybe more than one. He's a fraud, Margaret. And Sophia, she's just his next pawn." The room spun around me. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. Not only had Daniel stolen my daughter's love and my dignity, he had tricked her into becoming nothing more than a piece in his dirty game. And in that moment, my tears dried. Something inside me hardened. Daniel thought he had broken me, but he hadn't seen the fire that still lived in my bones. If he wanted war, I was ready. The night Caroline told me the truth about Daniel, something inside me changed. For weeks, I had been crushed, broken, and humiliated. But now, a different fire burned in me. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a woman preparing for war. The next morning, I sat at Caroline's table, sipping bitter coffee while my mind raced. "I need proof," I said quietly. Caroline nodded. "Then you'll get it. But you can't rush. A man like Daniel, he's slick. You need to outsmart him." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. The investigation began with whispers. Caroline and I reached out to old friends, people who might know where Daniel had lived before. It wasn't easy. He had covered his tracks well. But slowly, little pieces surfaced. A woman in a nearby town remembered him. "Yes, I knew a Daniel," she said on the phone. "Charming man. Promised my cousin the world, then left her broke." Another person said, "That man is trouble. He sweet-talks women, drains them, and disappears." Every story was the same. A handsome stranger, promises of wealth, a wedding ring, followed by abandonment, debt, and ruin. But I needed more than stories. I needed hard evidence. Caroline suggested we visit a lawyer she trusted, Mr. White, a sharp man in his 50s with kind eyes but a ruthless mind for the law. We sat in his office, telling him everything. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen. "If what you're saying is true, then your son-in-law is not only a fraud, he's a criminal. Bigamy, fraud, maybe even theft. But we need documents, bank records, marriage certificates, witnesses willing to testify." I clenched my fists. "I'll find them." So I began gathering. I went back to the store clerk who had mentioned the appraisal. He agreed to write a statement that Daniel had claimed he was selling my house. Caroline tracked down the widow from the other city, the one Daniel had married and drained. The woman, named Linda, looked weary when we met her. "He ruined me," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I thought I was his wife. Turns out I was just one of his many victims. If you're going after him, I'll help you." Linda gave us a copy of her marriage certificate. Same name, same signature, same man. Piece by piece, the case built itself like a puzzle. Financial records showed suspicious transfers. A notary confirmed Daniel had forged signatures before. Even his old landlord described how he left without paying rent, leaving debts behind. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Daniel wasn't just cruel. He was a predator, and I wasn't going to let him devour my daughter. Weeks passed. I stayed with Caroline, my heart aching every night for the house I had lost. But my spirit grew stronger with every document, every testimony, every witness who stood beside me. Finally, Mr. White looked over the thick folder we had built. He nodded. "It's enough," he said. "When the time comes, you'll bring this into the light." The time came sooner than I expected. One evening, Caroline returned from the market with news. "Daniel's throwing a big dinner next week," she said. Celebrating some new property deal. He's inviting family, friends, business partners. Everyone important. I felt my pulse quicken. This was it, the perfect stage. The night of the dinner, I dressed in my best church clothes, a navy dress, simple pearl earrings. My hands shook, but not from fear, from resolve. Caroline squeezed my arm. It's time, sister. Walk in there with your head high. We entered the hall where the dinner was held. Laughter filled the air. Crystal glasses clinked. At the center of it all was Daniel, standing tall, his hand on Sophia's waist, his smile dazzling as ever. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, raising his glass, tonight we celebrate a new beginning, a new property deal that will set us on the path to greatness. None of this would be possible without family. Cheers erupted, and that's when I stepped forward. The room quieted as people noticed me. Conversations hushed. Forks clattered against plates. Daniel's smile faltered for just a second. Mom, he said smoothly. What a surprise. I didn't expect you here. I held up the thick folder in my hand. My voice rang clear. You didn't expect me because you thought you had silenced me. But tonight, Daniel, everyone here will see who you really are. Gasps filled the room. Sophia stiffened, her eyes darting between us. Daniel chuckled nervously. She's confused again. Please don't embarrass yourself, Margaret. I opened the folder and pulled out the first paper. This, I said, holding it high, is a marriage certificate. Your marriage to a woman named Linda. Dated 2 years before you married my daughter. The crowd erupted. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Linda herself stepped forward from the back of the room. She had agreed to come with me, her face pale but determined. That's right, she said loudly. I'm his wife, his legal wife. The room exploded with gasps and whispers. Daniel's face drained of color. Lies, he stammered. She's making this up. I cut him off, slamming more papers on the table. And this is proof of your fraud. Bank transfers, forged signatures, witness statements. Do you want me to keep going? Business partners stood from their seats, their faces pale. Family members shook their heads in disbelief. Sophia clutched her chest, whispering, No, no. This can't be true. Linda stepped closer, her voice steady. It's true. He married me. He drained my savings. He left me with nothing. The room spun with chaos. Daniel tried to speak, but before he could, Mr. White, the lawyer, stood from the corner where he had been watching silently. Ladies and gentlemen, he said firmly, I have already contacted the authorities. This man is guilty of bigamy and fraud. The evidence is overwhelming. As if on cue, 2 officers entered the room. Gasps echoed as they walked straight to Daniel. You're under arrest, one officer said, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. Daniel struggled, his face twisted with fury. This isn't over, old woman. You'll regret this. But his words were drowned out by the roar of the crowd, by Sophia's sobs, by the sound of justice finally catching up to him. Sophia collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I approached her slowly, my heart heavy. Mom, she sobbed, looking up at me with red eyes. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Tears filled my eyes, but my voice was steady. You didn't want to know, but now the truth is here. She grabbed my hands, shaking. Please, forgive me. I was blind. I chose him over you, and I was wrong. I cupped her face gently. You're my daughter. I can't stop loving you. But love doesn't erase the pain. You'll have to earn back my trust. She nodded, weeping. I will. I promise I will. The rest of the night blurred. Daniel was dragged away, his empire crumbling behind him. His business partners turned their backs. His friends whispered in disgust. The golden mask he had worn for so long shattered, revealing nothing but greed and lies beneath. And me? I stood tall. The house was returned to my name. My dignity, though scarred, was restored. The whispers in the community faded, replaced by respect for the woman who had faced down a wolf and lived to tell the tale. As I stood on my porch weeks later, keys in my hand, I looked up at the house that had nearly been stolen from me. The walls seemed to sigh with relief. Caroline stood beside me, smiling. Sophia hovered nearby, still trying to rebuild what she had broken. I whispered to myself and to anyone listening, greed can blind even the ones we love. But truth, no matter how long it hides, always finds a way to speak.